25 forgotten 70s bands that deserve a massive comeback. The 70s made legends, but not every great band got their spotlight. These 25 hidden gems helped shape the sound of a decade, even if the world forgot their names. It's time to rediscover the music that slipped through the cracks. Fleetwood Mac. Starting in London in 1967 as a respected blues rock band led by Peter Green, Fleetwood Mac had early success with the instrumental hit Albatross. Green's troubled departure in 1970 led to an unstable period with multiple guitarists. In the mid-70s, the band relocated to the U.S. and recruited Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. This addition created the classic lineup and revitalized the band with a more pop-oriented sound, anchored by the remarkably resilient rhythm section of Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, the only constant members throughout their history. The pre-Buckingham Nicks era, often called the Bob Welch era, also produced successful albums like Heroes Are Hard to Find, showcasing a different, more AOR/rock sound. The album Fleetwood Mac, 1975, was a huge success. The album Rumours, 1977, recorded amidst intense romantic conflicts, became one of the best-selling albums ever. The intense interpersonal drama documented in Rumours, two couples breaking up, affairs, became as famous as the music itself, fueling public fascination. Christine McVie, née Perfect, already an established blues musician, joined officially after marrying John McVie and became a crucial songwriter and vocalist well before the arrival of Buckingham and Nicks, penning hits like Say You Love Me. Joy Division. Formed in 1976, Joy Division gained attention with their unique, atmospheric sound, exploring alienation and isolation through Ian Curtis's deep, emotive vocals, often reflecting the bleak post-industrial landscape of Manchester. Their debut album, Unknown Pleasures, 1979, featuring Martin Hannett's groundbreaking production, became a post-punk classic with tracks like She's Lost Control. Tragedy struck when Ian Curtis, who suffered from epilepsy and depression, committed suicide in 1980, his distinctive, erratic dancing becoming an iconic part of his stage presence. The stark, minimalist aesthetic extended to their influential record sleeves designed by Peter Saville for Factory Records. Ironically, his death propelled the band's fame. Their final album, Closer, and songs like Love Will Tear Us Apart cemented their status, paving the way for New Order. Despite their short career, their sound profoundly influenced goth rock, post-punk, and alternative music for decades. The band's name itself was derived from the term for sexual slavery wings in Nazi concentration camps described in the novel The House of Dolls, reflecting their dark thematic preoccupations. Badfinger. Badfinger was once hailed as successors to the Beatles, even having Paul McCartney write their first hit, Come and Get It. Signed in 1968, hits like No Matter What and Baby Blue quickly found success. However, tragedy struck with Pete Ham's suicide in 1975 due to financial and managerial issues, specifically related to their notoriously corrupt manager, Stan Polly. Members Tom Evans and Mike Gibbons also died prematurely later. Their music blended catchy pop and powerful rock, power pop, showcased on albums No Dice and the George Harrison-produced Straight Up. Their song, Without You, became a massive worldwide hit for Harry Nilsson and later Mariah Carey, though they received little financial reward. The connection with the Beatles' Apple Records brought pros and cons, leading to contract issues despite continued creativity on Wish You Were Here, 1974. The album, Straight Up, was partially produced by George Harrison and then finished by Todd Rundgren, highlighting their connections and the turmoil at Apple. Despite the tragedies, their hook-laden guitar sound became a key touchstone for the burgeoning power pop genre. King Crimson. King Crimson symbolized innovation in progressive rock, blending jazz, classical, and experimental elements, often within single compositions, characterized by complex time signatures and instrumental virtuosity. Their debut album, In the Court of the Crimson King, 1969, featuring 21st century schizoid man and iconic mellotron sounds, was a milestone. However, creative intensity also caused internal friction, leading to the departure of key members like Ian MacDonald and Greg Lake. Led by Robert Fripp, the band constantly changed lineups and explored new sounds, often undergoing radical shifts even between tracks on the same album. Robert Fripp's unique guitar technique, Frippertronics, using tape loops, became a signature element in later iterations and solo work. This constant flux created pressure and led to their initial disbandment in 1974. The lineup that produced Lark's Tongues and Aspic, Starless and Bible Black, and Red, with John Wetton and Bill Bruford, is often cited as another peak of their creativity and heaviness. Fripp often described King Crimson not as a fixed band, but as a way of doing things, emphasizing the conceptual approach over specific personnel. The Sex Pistols. The quintessential UK punk rock band, the Sex Pistols, featuring Johnny Rotten snare, Steve Jones's powerful guitar riffs, Paul Cook's drumming, and Sid Vicious' image, created a cultural earthquake orchestrated partly by manager Malcolm McLaren. Their music attacked the status quo, monarchy, and music industry with profane lyrics. Anarchy in the UK, God Save the Queen. Guitarist Steve Jones created a signature wall of sound by layering multiple guitar tracks, often using stolen equipment in the early days. A controversial TV appearance in their Soul studio album, Nevermind the Bollocks, 1977, cemented their notoriety. However, drug abuse, clashes, and manipulation led to their implosion after a disastrous U.S. tour in 1978, capping a brief but impactful 2.5-year career. Sid Vicious, despite limited musical ability on bass, became the visual icon of punk nihilism, culminating in his tragic death in 1979. Wild Cherry. Formed by Rob Parisi in 1970, Wild Cherry initially played hard rock, building a regional following in the Ohio area. A request to play some funky music from a black audience during a specific gig inspired Parisi to write Play That Funky Music. The song, blending funk, rock, and pop, became a massive #1 hit, went platinum, and achieved huge crossover appeal, dominating both pop and R&B radio. However, the band couldn't escape the one-hit wonder label, struggling to find a follow-up that resonated similarly. The song's title itself became a cultural catchphrase, often used humorously in situations involving unexpected shifts in musical style. Subsequent singles failed, and they disbanded in 1979. Despite being labeled a one-hit wonder, the band did release several albums trying to recapture the magic, exploring more rock and AOR directions. Play That Funky Music earned the band a Grammy nomination for Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals. Budgie. Budgie's sound was a potent mix of hard rock, blues, and progressive elements, influencing many later metal bands like Iron Maiden and Soundgarden, despite limited chart success. Showcased across 7 albums in the 70s, tracks like Bread Fan, later covered by Metallica, and Crash Course in Brain Surgery were highlights. The core was a power trio: Burke Shelley's distinctive high vocals / bass, Tony Borges' blues-influenced guitar, and Ray Phillips' dynamic drumming. They're often quirky or unusual song titles, e.g., Nude Disintegrating Parachutist Woman, added to their unique identity. Burke Shelley's high-pitched vocals were quite distinct for the heavy rock scene of the time, setting them apart from bluesier shouters. They continued until 2010, when Shelley's health forced disbandment. Although primarily a trio, they occasionally experimented with keyboards, adding another layer to their sometimes complex arrangements found on albums like Squawk. Hailing from Cardiff, Wales, their distinct identity set them apart from the dominant English heavy rock bands of the era. Sha Na Na. Known for reviving 50s doo-wop and rock and roll with theatrical flair, Sha Na Na gained massive exposure performing surprisingly early on the bill at Woodstock in 1969, a stark contrast to the psychedelic acts surrounding them. Their energetic set and distinctive greaser look, rooted in their origins as a Glee Club spin-off at Columbia University, brought them national attention. Several members went on to have notable careers outside the band, including actor John Bozer Bauman and later Screen Actors Guild president Alan Miles. They further cemented their place in pop culture through their appearance as Johnny Casino and the Gamblers in the movie Grease, 1978, and their own syndicated TV show, 1977 to 1981. Their act was meticulously choreographed, blending music with comedy skits and intricate dance routines that played up the 50s archetypes. The Runaways. Led by Joan Jett and Lita Ford, and initially managed by the controversial Kim Foley, this Los Angeles band gained fame for their raw energy and defiant attitude through songs like Cherry Bomb. Their blend of hard rock, punk, and glam resonated, especially in Japan, where they experienced Beatlemania levels of fandom. Their legacy includes 4 studio albums, with songs like Hollywood and Queens of Noise becoming cult classics. However, creative differences between Jett, punk/glam, and Ford, hard rock/metal, plus the pressures of fame and alleged mismanagement, led to tension. Bassist Jackie Fox's later allegations of sexual assault against Foley brought renewed attention to the band's difficult experiences. Their final show in late 1978 marked the end, but they decisively broke down barriers for women in hard rock. Their raw, rebellious image and sound directly paved the way for numerous female punk and rock artists that followed in the late 70s and 80s. The divergent and highly successful solo careers of Joan Jett, as Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, and Lita Ford further highlighted their contrasting musical paths after the band split. Big Star. Formed in Memphis in the early 70s, Big Star stood out with catchy melodies, jangly guitars, and Alex Chilton's poignant, often melancholic lyrics, creating a sound often described as bittersweet power pop. Their debut album, One Record, 1972, included classics like In the Street, later the theme for That 70s Show, and 13. Despite critical acclaim, distribution issues and lack of label support severely hampered commercial success, even for their second album, Radio City, 1974. The creative tension between the more pop-oriented Chris Bell, who left after the first album, and the increasingly experimental Alex Chilton defined their early dynamic. Internal tensions and frustration led to their breakup after the fractured recording of their notoriously dark third album, Third/Sister Lovers. Their lack of contemporary success despite clear talent made them the archetypal, critically acclaimed, commercially ignored band, fueling their cult status. Alex Chilton already had major pop success as a teenager singing lead on the Box Tops' massive hit The Letter, adding another layer of irony to Big Star's struggles. T.Rex. Mark Bolan, a flamboyant fashion and music icon, led T.Rex, evolved from the earlier psychedelic folk Tyrannosaurus Rex to massive fame in the UK's early 70s glam rock scene, sparking a phenomenon dubbed T-Rextasy, comparable to Beatlemania. His simplified, catchy booger rock riffs and often nonsensical, mystical lyrics on hits like Ride a White Swan, Hot Love, Get On, Bang a Gong, and the album Electric Warrior, 1971, defined the sound. Bolan's lyrics often featured fantastical imagery, elves, cars, and cosmic themes, creating a unique, almost childlike yet glamorous mythology. Success in the US was more limited. As glam faded, Boland struggled to maintain momentum. His tragic death in a 1977 car crash ended T.Rex abruptly. He consciously simplified his sound from the earlier complex folk to create instantly catchy, danceable rock and roll singles perfect for the pop charts. The Carpenters. Siblings Richard and Karen Carpenter began their journey in California. Known for Richard's lush, meticulously crafted arrangements and Karen's flawless pitch and seemingly effortless delivery. Their second album, Close to You, 1970, brought their breakthrough with hits like They Long to Be Close to You, earning 2 Grammys. Karen's distinctive contralto voice was a highlight, though she initially considered herself primarily a drummer and possessed considerable, often overlooked, talent on the instrument. They faced some critical backlash during their peak for being perceived as overly wholesome or square compared to the harder rock acts of the era. Behind the success, Karen battled anorexia nervosa. She passed away in 1983 at age 32, raising awareness about eating disorders. Richard Carpenter meticulously oversaw every aspect of their recordings, creating a signature polished sound that involved complex vocal layering and orchestration. Their initial contract with A&M Records was secured after label co-founder Herb Alpert heard their demo tape and was impressed by their unique sound. The Guess Who. Hailing from Winnipeg, Canada, The Guess Who started as a cover band before developing their own sound with psychedelic rock elements and distinctly Canadian lyrical references, becoming Canada's first international rock stars. Their breakthrough came with These Eyes, 1969. They continued with hits like No Time, Laughing, and Especially American Woman, a U.S. #1 hit in 1970. The lyrics of American Woman were famously improvised by Burton Cummings during a live jam session when he forgot the words to another song. However, frequent lineup changes, departures of key songwriters Randy Bachman, who then formed Bachman Turner Overdrive, and Burton Cummings, affected consistency. By the mid-70s, they lost momentum and disbanded. Their sound evolved considerably, moving from garage rock roots through psychedelia to more straightforward hard rock, and even jazzy influences later on. American Woman generated significant controversy, interpreted by many as anti-American, though the band insisted it was more broadly about societal issues and the dangers of American influence. Montrose. The original lineup featured Sammy Hagar, vocals, Ronnie Montrose, guitar, Bill Church, bass, and Denny Carmassi, drums, creating a blueprint for American hard rock with a raw, powerful sound. Their Ted Templeman-produced self-titled debut album, 1973, with Rock Candy and Bad Motor Scooter, is a hard rock classic. Ronnie Montrose was already a respected session guitarist before forming the band, having played on landmark albums by Van Morrison and Herbie Hancock. Early success was quickly overshadowed by internal tensions between Hagar and Montrose over creative control, leading to Hagar's departure. He went on to massive solo and Van Halen success. The band continued with other singers but failed to recapture the magic, becoming a key influence despite their brief peak. The raw, stripped-down production of their debut album was influential, contrasting with the more elaborate rock productions becoming common at the time. They disbanded in 1977. Television. Their debut album, Marquee Moon, 1977, is considered one of the greatest rock albums, notable for its intricate, weaving dual guitar interplay between Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd, often eschewing traditional riffs for complex melodic lines. Featuring the epic title track, it showcased exceptional musicianship rooted in the influential CBGB scene in New York. Tom Verlaine's poetic, often oblique lyrics added another layer of mystery and intellectualism to their sound. Despite critical acclaim, commercial success was limited. Internal tensions, especially between Verlaine and original bassist Richard Hell, who left in 1975, caused instability. Their second album, Adventure, 1978, was more successful in the UK but less acclaimed. Television disbanded in 1978. Their influence can be heard not just in rock, but also in the extended instrumental explorations of some later jam bands. Lynyrd Skynyrd. Their debut album, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd, 1973, featuring Freebird and Simple Man, established Lynyrd Skynyrd as Southern rock icons with their fiery triple guitar attack. Their music celebrated Southern culture and working-class spirit, often with a rebellious edge and a reputation for intense, sometimes confrontational, live performances. Their feud/friendship with Neil Young, sparked by his songs Southern Man and Alabama, and their response Sweet Home Alabama, became legendary. Successful albums like Second Helping solidified their status. Tragedy struck on October 20th, 1977, when their chartered plane crashed, killing Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, and others, just days after releasing the prophetic Street Survivors album, whose original cover depicted the band engulfed in flames. Free Bird, with its extended guitar solo finale, became the archetypal concert encore request, often shouted ironically at unrelated shows. The project of Robin Scott, is primarily remembered for the global synth-pop hit Pop Music, 1979, a song born from experimenting with synthesizers and drum machines, showcasing early use of sequencing. The track captured the late 70s zeitgeist with its electronic sounds, catchy melody, and unique spoken-word chorus listing global cities. The song's distinctive sound was partly achieved by recording different sections at varying speeds and pitches, adding to its quirky feel. Pop Music topped charts worldwide, paving the way for the 80s synth-pop boom. However, couldn't sustain that success, quickly fading despite subsequent interesting electronic explorations. Robin Scott had a background in the art and folk scenes before embracing electronics, bringing a conceptual approach to The song itself remains instantly recognizable. The Sweet. Starting as the Sweet Shop, the band became major players in UK glam rock, known for their high, layered vocal harmonies and catchy hooks, transitioning from bubblegum pop to hard rock. Early hits like Funny Funny, written by Chin and Chapman, brought success but also an image they grew to resent. Their breakthrough came with Blockbuster, 1973, showcasing a heavier sound. Their visual image, featuring glitter, platform boots, and makeup, was a key part of the glam rock movement, influencing many bands. Other hits like Ballroom Blitz and Fox on the Run followed, but the band increasingly desired creative control, penning heavier B-sides and album tracks. Tensions with songwriters, vocalist Brian Connolly's personal issues, and changing trends led to decline and disbandment in 1981. Despite their pop hits, albums like Desolation Boulevard and Sweet Fanny Adams showcased a much harder rock edge appreciated by metal fans. Derek and the Dominos. Formed out of Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, this short-lived supergroup featured Eric Clapton, Bobby Whitlock, Carl Rattle, and Jim Gordon, aiming for a more anonymous, band-oriented feel. Their masterpiece, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, 1970, featuring the classic title track Layla and Duane Allman's searing slide guitar, captured a raw, desperate emotional intensity fueled by Clapton's unrequited love for Pattie Boyd. Bobby Whitlock co-wrote many of the album songs with Clapton, making his contribution crucial yet often overlooked. However, Clapton's heroin addiction, Allman's tragic death shortly after recording, and internal conflicts, including drummer Jim Gordon's later diagnosed schizophrenia, led to the band's swift disbandment during sessions for a second album in 1971. The album initially received a lukewarm reception and only gained widespread recognition after the Layla single was re-released later. The Jam. Led by Paul Weller, The Jam was a force in UK punk rock and the mod revival, drawing heavily on the sharp style and energy of 60s bands like The Who, with Weller's sharp suits becoming as iconic as the music. Their debut album, In the City, 1977, had raw punk energy. Later albums like All Mod Cons showed musical growth and sharp social commentary reflecting Thatcher-era Britain. Bassist Bruce Foxton and drummer Rick Buckler provided a powerful, driving rhythm section essential to the band's energetic sound. They achieved massive success in the UK with 4 consecutive #1 albums, but didn't replicate that internationally. In 1982, at their absolute peak, Weller disbanded the group to explore new soul-influenced musical directions with the Style Council. Weller's decision to break up the band at their commercial zenith remains one of the most discussed and debated moves in British rock history. The Modern Lovers. Hailing from Boston, Jonathan Richman's band was influenced by the Velvet Underground's raw sound, but possessed a unique, almost naive charm and minimalist approach. Their direct music often focused on everyday life with Richman's distinct, conversational, and often childlike lyrical perspective, Roadrunner, Pablo Picasso. Drummer David Robinson later achieved massive success as a founding member of the Cars. Despite a loyal local following and recording influential demos produced by John Cale in 1972, they struggled for mainstream success. The band broke up due to internal tensions and Richman's changing artistic direction in 1974 before their debut album was finally released, 1976. Richman continued with various lineups under the Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers name, exploring increasingly stripped-down, often acoustic and whimsical styles completely removed from the proto-punk origins. Thin Lizzy. Fronted by the charismatic poet-slash-bassist Phil Lynott, this Irish band carved a unique niche with its signature twin-lead guitar harmonies and blend of hard rock, blues, and Celtic folk storytelling, evident in Lynott's often narrative lyrical style. Albums like Jailbreak, 1976, and the electrifying Live and Dangerous, 1978, widely regarded as one of the best live albums ever, along with hits The Boys Are Back in Town and Whiskey in the Jar, are classics. Their twin guitar harmony sound, particularly perfected by Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson, became hugely influential on later hard rock and metal bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. However, constant lineup changes around the core of Lynott and drummer Brian Downey, plus Lynott's battle with addiction, plagued the band. They disbanded in 1983. As one of the few prominent black frontmen in hard rock during the 70s, Phil Lynott broke significant racial barriers. Blue Öyster Cult. This New York band stood out with an intelligent, often cryptic mix of hard rock, early heavy metal, and psychedelia, frequently collaborating with sci-fi/fantasy writers like Michael Moorcock for lyrics. Best known for The Haunting, Don't Fear, The Reaper, 1976. Their catalog also includes FM radio staples like Godzilla and Burnin' For You. Their band name itself, suggested by manager/producer Sandy Pullman, hinted at hidden meanings and esoteric knowledge, adding to their mystique. Despite consistent albums and a reputation for tight live shows featuring Buck Dharma's guitar prowess and early, pioneering use of lasers, BC is often considered a cult band. Their distinctive sound, intellectual themes, and iconic logo secure their special place in rock history. The cryptic lyrics and heavy sound led some conservative groups in the 80s to accuse them of Satanism, a claim the band always refuted. Sparks. Brothers Ron, keyboards, deadpan stare, Hitler mustache, and Russell Mael vocals, hyperactive stage presence, soaring falsetto, crafted a unique, genre-bending sound mixing art pop, glam rock, and new wave, always delivered with theatricality and sharp wit. Characterized by Russell's dramatic vocals and Ron's witty, often surreal lyrics, they were always ahead of their time, demonstrating a remarkable ability to reinvent their sound across decades. They collaborated with legendary disco producer Giorgio Moroder in the late 70s for the influential album No. 1 in Heaven, marking a major shift to electronic music. The album Kimono My House, 1974, with This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us was their European breakthrough. While never massive global superstars, they've maintained a long, critically acclaimed career. Their enduring career and consistent artistic vision have earned them immense respect from fellow musicians and a dedicated multi-generational fan base. Mott the Hoople. Led by the gravel-voiced Ian Hunter, this British band embodied rock and roll swagger but was near collapse before fan David Bowie gifted them the song All the Young Dudes, 1972, producing the subsequent album as well. The hit saved their career and became a defining glam rock generational anthem, boosted by their already strong reputation as a powerful live act. Before Bowie's intervention, they were known for chaotic, powerful live shows that often overshadowed their less successful studio recordings. They followed with successes like All the Way from Memphis, blending rock and roll energy with glam flair and Hunter's streetwise lyrics. However, internal tensions, particularly surrounding guitarist Mick Ralphs, who left to form Bad Company, led to Hunter's departure in 1974. Ian Hunter's songwriting often focused on the disillusionment and realities of being a working rock band, adding a layer of grit beneath the glam exterior. The 70s brought iconic style and groundbreaking music. Ever wonder about the black bands who defined that sound but then disappeared? We're revisiting 20 incredible groups spanning soul to funk whose stories faded away. Get ready to rediscover the unforgettable music and uncover the mysteries behind their vanishing acts. Let's jump right into it. The main ingredient. They embarked on their musical pathway back in 1964, originally composed of Donald McPherson, Luther Simmons Jr., and Tony Sylvester. Now, these guys put in years of hard work, really grinding to catch a break. And then 1972 arrived, and they released that absolute classic, Everybody Plays the Fool. The whole world just fell in love with that tune. It was one of those unforgettable songs that simply stayed with you, you know? It possessed that genuine emotion, that raw, honest delivery that resonated so deeply with so many listeners. Heartbreakingly, Donald McPherson passed away unexpectedly in '71. But the group persevered, bringing in Cuba Gooding Sr. as their new lead vocalist. He turned out to be a fantastic addition. They carried on, achieving further success with hits like Just Don't Want to Be Lonely and Happiness Is Just Around the Bend. The main ingredient was truly sitting atop the R&B world, but, as is common with many groups, they eventually encountered challenges. The overall music landscape began to shift. There were some changes within the lineup, and things just weren't quite the same as before. Cuba Gooding Sr. decided to go solo in '77, although he did participate in later reunions. Sadly, he passed away in 2017, bringing a close to the story of this truly iconic group. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Put together back in '69 by the truly visionary Maurice White, alongside his brother Verdine and a formidable assembly of talented musicians. They masterfully mixed all sorts of musical styles into something that was unmistakably EWF. They weren't just making music, they aimed to spread messages of love, togetherness, and positive thinking through their work. The '70s were undoubtedly their decade, as they ruled the charts with massive hits like September and Shining Star. Those songs became instant anthems for a generation, Their dazzling stage shows, complete with elaborate costumes and synchronized choreography, were an essential part of the whole EWF experience. Like many long-running bands, change inevitably came. Maurice White had to step back from performing in the 90s because of health struggles, and he sadly passed away in 2016. Other founding members have also passed on since then, but their incredible legacy lives on. Verdine White, Philip Bailey, and Ralph Johnson are still actively keeping the vibrant EWF spirit alive and well today. LaBelle. They actually began as Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, featuring the talents of Patti LaBelle, Nona Hendrix, and Sarah Dash. But when they transformed into LaBelle, that's when they blossomed into something truly unique. We're talking about a sound that was practically exploding with energy, blending rock, funk, soul, and just about everything else, you know? And their live performances? Goodness gracious! They were absolutely sensational, all flash, high fashion, incredible costumes, and just an overwhelming amount of fierce presence on stage. The 1974 hit, And Lady Marmalade, was unleashed. That song wasn't just popular. It was a full-blown cultural event. It dominated the radio waves, packed the dance floors, you name it. It was like a musical earthquake, launching LaBelle onto the world stage in a massive way. Their album Nightbirds, which gave us that iconic track, really sealed their legacy in music history. It was a potent blast of sound that was completely original. But after reaching such amazing peaks, the ladies decided to go their separate ways, following a tour in 1976. Yet, you know, that wasn't the final chapter. Patti LaBelle became a megastar, didn't she? A solo sensation. Nona Hendrix forged her own path, delving into some really interesting avant-garde music. And Sarah Dash? She became a highly sought-after voice for session work. That's why they remain legends, even when they pursued individual careers. Their brilliance continued to shine. The Moments. They got their start way back in 1965 with Al Goodman, Billy Brown, and Harry Ray, the trio that would become celebrated for their fantastic harmonies and the genuine, heartfelt emotion they poured into every single song. They really found their groove in the 70s with unforgettable tunes like Love on a Two-Way Street and Sexy Mama, which quickly became beloved classics. The Moments possessed a unique ability to make you feel like you were sharing those intimate moments, those deeply passionate feelings right along with them. They perfectly captured the essence of love and longing in their music. It was a true talent. But life, as it often does, throws unexpected challenges your way. In 1978, they faced some legal disputes that necessitated a name change to Ray, Goodman, and Brown. And you know what? They managed to keep that special magic going, didn't they? They continued releasing hits like Special Lady, maintaining their momentum and proving that regardless of a name, their exceptional talent shone through. However, things shifted once more in 1982 when Harry Ray opted to pursue a solo career. Now, he did eventually return to the group before his unfortunate passing in 1992, but that change certainly had a noticeable effect on the group's dynamic. Even though they kept the music alive with some new members joining the fold, they never quite managed to recapture the same level of mainstream popularity they had previously enjoyed. Al Goodman passed on in 2010, and Billy Brown suffered a stroke in 2016, sadly closing a significant chapter for this legendary R&B group. Rose Royce. Rose Royce first came onto the scene in 1973, fronted by the amazing vocals of Gwen Dickey, along with Henry Garner on drums, LeQuient Duke, Job holding down the bass, Michael Moore on saxophone, Kenny Copeland handling trumpet and vocals, Kenji Brown on guitar and vocals, Freddie Dunn also on trumpet, and Victor Nix on keyboards. They were a sizable band with an equally big, impressive sound, and they seemed poised to conquer the music world. They were definitely building momentum and generating buzz, But everything shifted dramatically with the release of Car Wash in 1976. That song wasn't just a hit. It was an absolute sensation. It rocketed to #1 on the charts and became the iconic theme song for the hit movie of the same name. That infectious track was simply everywhere you turned and perfectly captured the feeling of that particular moment in time. Rolls-Royce was absolutely on fire during the late 70s. They were churning out hit after successful hit with memorable songs like I Want to Get Next to You, Wishing on a Star, and the incredibly powerful Love Don't Live Here Anymore. They expertly blended raw, gritty funk with smooth, soulful R&B, forging a sound that was completely captivating. But, as often happens in the unpredictable music business, things began to change course in the early 80s. Musical trends were shifting, and the group started experiencing some internal friction. Their charismatic lead singer, Gwen Dickey, left in 1980 to concentrate on launching her solo career, and that departure marked a significant turning point for the band. Following that, the band's mainstream success started to wane, and they struggled to fully recapture the extraordinary magic they had created just a few years earlier. The Delphonics. These fellas came together back in 1965, spearheaded by brothers William and Wilbur Hart, with Randy Kane completing the original trio, and later on, Major Harris also joined the lineup. Now, the real enchantment of the Delphonics stemmed from their voices. Those incredibly smooth harmonies, those sweet, captivating melodies, they just had a way of drawing you right in, didn't they? Their music was all about those heartfelt lyrics, those tunes about love found and love lost, and all the emotions caught in between. And when they released timeless songs like Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time and La La, Means I Love You, they created instant classics. They truly helped shape the entire Philly soul sound. And we absolutely have to mention Tom Bell. He was the production wizard behind their signature sound, the genius who sculpted their music with those gorgeous, rich arrangements. The Delphonics were riding high at the top of the music world in the late 60s and early 70s, racking up gold records and chart-dominating hits. They were truly enjoying a golden era. But, as with most wonderful things, change eventually arrived. Randy Kane left the group in 1971, and Tom Bell began dedicating his time to other musical projects. Things started shifting, and their widespread popularity began to gradually lessen. Ultimately, the members went their separate ways, each trying out solo careers. The Ike and Tina Turner Review. This powerhouse group kicked off in 1960, led by the undeniably talented, though often controversial duo of Ike Turner and his wife, the legendary Tina Turner. And believe me, this was far more than just a husband and wife act. It was a full-fledged musical operation. You had Ike's incredible band, the Kings of Rhythm, laying down those seriously funky and infectious grooves. Then you had the Ikettes, those amazing backup singers and dancers, adding that extra layer of excitement and flair. But let's be perfectly clear, the undeniable star at the heart of it all was Tina, with that unbelievable voice, those stage moves that were like pure fire, and a charisma that was simply magnetic. When they were performing at their peak, they were truly an unstoppable force. They absolutely dominated the charts with enduring classics like Proud Mary, River Deep Mountain High, and Nutbush City Limits, songs that became permanent fixtures on dance floors and radio playlists everywhere. But beneath all the dazzling lights and glamorous appearances, considerable trouble was brewing behind the scenes. Their personal relationship intertwined with their professional lives was fraught with serious problems, particularly for Tina. She endured significant abuse from Ike, and eventually, it reached a breaking point. Their professional partnership finally dissolved in 1976, and it wasn't long after that their personal relationship also ended. Commodores. The Commodores originally came together back in 1968 at the famed Tuskegee Institute, and that initial lineup was a genuine force. Lionel Richie, Thomas McClary, William King, Ronald LaPred, Milan Williams, and Walter Orange. Right from the very beginning, they possessed this amazing energy, this natural gift for creating music that was simply irresistible. They truly hit their peak in the 70s, and it felt like they conquered the entire music world. When they released incredible hits like Brick House, Easy, and 3 Times a Lady, they carved out a permanent place for themselves in music history, didn't they? Those songs were absolutely everywhere on the radio, filling up dance floors, just pure musical gold. Lionel Richie certainly played a huge part in their success, naturally. He was a musical dynamo, possessing that remarkable songwriting ability, and his voice was just incredibly smooth, like velvet. But the entire group was immensely talented. Every single member brought something special and essential to their sound. But, as often happens with bands, circumstances change. In 1982, Lionel Richie made the decision to embark on a solo career, and that move effectively marked the end of the original lineup, as fans knew it. Thomas McClary departed in 1983, followed by Ronald LaPred in 1986. The Commodores did continue performing with new members joining the ranks, and they still produced some fine music, but it just didn't feel quite the same. The unique magic created by that original lineup was something truly special and proved impossible to fully replicate. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were absolute pillars of the rich Philly soul scene, and they were true masters at crafting those enduring, timeless sounds. The classic group lineup featured Harold Melvin, the incomparable Teddy Pendergrass, Bernard Wilson, Lawrence Brown, and Lloyd Parks. And let's be crystal clear, Teddy Pendergrass's voice was something truly extraordinary. That sheer power, that raw emotion he conveyed, it was simply undeniable, wasn't it? Listening to him sing felt like smooth velvet washing over you. And that unique quality is what made their songs resonate so deeply and powerfully with listeners. They completely took over the music charts in the 70s with unforgettable classics like If You Don't Know Me By Now and The Love I Lost. Those songs were just drenched in genuine emotion. You could practically feel the heartache. You could certainly feel the intense passion. It sounded like real people singing about real-life experiences. But in 1976, the landscape shifted dramatically. Teddy Pendergrass made the decision to leave the group and launch his own solo career, and that move represented a major turning point for the band. They found it challenging to maintain the same remarkable level of success without his distinctive voice leading the charge. They did try bringing in new lead singers like David Ebo and later Gil Saunders, but they never quite managed to fully replicate the special magic of that original, iconic lineup. The Chi-Lites. Coming to us from Chicago, the Chi-Lites first appeared on the music scene way back in 1959, with Eugene Record, Robert Lester, Creddle Red Jones, and Marshall Thompson making up the original group. From the very beginning, they were known for those gorgeous harmonies, those ballads that tugged at your heartstrings. When they released tracks like Have You Seen Her and Oh Girl in the early 70s, folks, those songs became deeply woven into the fabric of so many people's lives. Just pure gold, wouldn't you say? They weren't merely singing. They were sharing stories, expressing deep feelings, making listeners truly feel what they were conveying. Now, like so many groups, they navigated through their share of high points and difficulties. Members came and departed over the passing years. Eugene Record, the main voice, the man who penned so many of their signature hits, he left the group during the late 70s, although he did make a brief return in the 80s. Even though the group continued performing with new vocalists, the original magic formula of that first lineup never quite came back together. Marshall Thompson, though, he remained a steady hand. He diligently kept the Chi-Lites' cherished legacy vibrant for many decades. He was truly the group's heart and soul. He kept their wonderful music alive right up until his passing in 2016. And that's precisely why, even now, the Chi-Lites' songs remain utterly timeless classics. The Stylistics. They got their start back in 1968, bringing together Russell Tompkins Jr., Herb Morrell, Arian Love, James Smith, and James Dunn. Now, let me tell you, what truly set the Stylistics apart was Russell Tompkins Jr.'s incredible voice, right? That high falsetto, simply breathtaking. It was like listening to pure silk woven into music. And it wasn't solely his voice. It was the way all those harmonies blended together so perfectly, sheer magic. When they delivered songs such as Betcha by Golly, wow, and You Make Me Feel Brand New, they crafted moments of pure musical heaven. It was the absolute peak sound of Philly soul. They were instrumental in defining that whole smooth genre. But just like many other bands, the Stylistics encountered their own set of hurdles. Things took a turn in the mid-70s when Tom Bell, who was essentially the mastermind behind their distinctive sound, ceased producing for them. It marked a significant change and definitely impacted their trajectory. Their popularity began to dip somewhat here in the States, although they surprisingly continued to draw big crowds over in the UK. As time went on, the lineup began to evolve. James Dunn and James Smith departed the group in the early 80s. But let's make one thing clear. Nothing could diminish the brilliance of their early hits. Those songs are enduring classics, absolute treasures. They transport you back to another era and stir up all those wonderful emotions, those lovely feelings. The Stylistics left an unforgettable impression with their harmonies and those iconic ballads, true legends of soul music. The JBs. Alright now, let's dive into a band that was pure funk firepower, the JBs. Imagine this. It's 1970, and the one and only James Brown, the godfather of soul, needs a new backup band because his previous lineup decided to split. He wasn't just going to pick anybody off the street. He assembled a true powerhouse, and thus, the JBs were born. Man, oh man, this group was overflowing with talent. We're talking Bootsy Collins, laying down those absolutely infectious, funky bass lines. The fella was a natural-born star. And Fred Wesley, handling that trombone, he could make that instrument practically talk to you. These musicians weren't just playing songs. They were constructing an entirely new kind of infectious groove. They were the solid foundation for some of James Brown's most memorable hits, Pass the Peas, Doing It to Death. You surely remember those tunes that just make you want to move your feet. But the JBs weren't simply guys in the background. No, sir. They stepped right into the spotlight themselves, releasing some absolutely fantastic jams under their own name. They earn a reputation for their unadulterated energy, their incredibly tight rhythms, and the knack they had for making every single performance feel like an amazing party. But, as the saying goes, all good things must end, as James Brown's own massive fame started to cool down a bit in the late 70s and early 80s. The JB's time basking in the limelight also began to recede. By the mid-80s, they had essentially disbanded. However, the music certainly didn't stop for those incredible players. Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker, they're absolute giants. They didn't just disappear. They kept on playing, continued collaborating, and carried on influencing the very sound of funk music for years to come. The Jackson 5. Let's take a trip back to Gary, Indiana, and talk about the sheer magic of the Jackson 5. Five talented brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and the phenom Little Michael, all expertly managed by their father, Joe Jackson. They were groundbreaking as one of the very first black groups to achieve such massive mainstream success. These kids possessed an unbelievable amount of talent. Their energy was infectious, their performances captivating, and the world simply couldn't get enough of them. Huge hits like I Want You Back and ABC established them as the undeniable kings of pop and soul in the early 70s. But as the brothers started growing older, naturally, things began to change. In '75, they made the big move from Motown to Epic Records, rebranding themselves as the Jacksons. Jermaine chose to stay with Motown, and his spot was filled by their younger brother, Randy. They continued making music together, but Michael's solo career began to absolutely skyrocket. Albums like Off the Wall and Thriller launched him into global superstardom, and the original Jackson 5's collective spotlight inevitably started to fade. They left behind an incredible legacy of iconic songs, unforgettable performances, and a powerful reminder of family talent. They remain legends forever. The Blackbyrds. This talented group was formed back in 1973 by the renowned trumpeter Donald Byrd, along with several of his promising music students from Howard University. The original lineup consisted of Kevin Toney on keyboards, Keith Kilgo handling vocals and drums, Joe Hall on bass guitar, Alan Barnes playing saxophone and clarinet, and Barney Perry on guitar. This was truly a collective of seriously skilled and creative musicians. They possessed a remarkable ability to take various musical genres, jazz, funk, R&B, and seamlessly blend them together into something incredibly unique and appealing. They had a smooth quality, they definitely brought the funk, and they just radiated a vibe that was utterly irresistible. And when they released fantastic tracks like the smooth, Walking in Rhythm, and the funky Rock Creek Park, those songs quickly became favorites on the radio and essential tunes on the dance floor. They weren't afraid to be adventurous, to push the established boundaries of what people expected music to sound like. They were simply focused on creating music that felt good, music that moved people physically and emotionally, and music that felt authentic. The Blackbyrds were notably influential because their sophisticated yet accessible sound attracted a very broad audience. It was music you could easily dance to, but also really appreciate on a deeper musical level. But as the overall music scene began to evolve and the popularity of disco started to decline, things became more challenging for the Blackbyrds to maintain their momentum. By the early 80s, many of the original members decided to go their separate ways, wanting to focus their energies on solo careers or pursue other musical projects. And essentially, that's when the group ultimately disbanded. Mandrill. Mandrill got its start back in 1968, founded by the talented Wilson brothers, Carlos, Lou, and Rick. And let me tell you, this band was all about pushing musical boundaries, about fearlessly taking elements of funk, jazz, Latin rhythms, rock, and just blending it all together into something fresh. That adventurous fusion is exactly what created their unique signature sound. They weren't afraid to get experimental, to really test the limits of musical convention, and that's precisely what made them such an exciting group to listen to. When they released tracks like Fence Walk and Ape is High, it perfectly highlighted their exceptional musical skills and their truly distinctive style. It was a sound that belonged entirely to them. You'd never mistake Mandrill for any other band. Mandrill boasted a whole crew of gifted musicians, each contributing their individual talents and high energy to the mix. But as time marched on, things began to evolve, and like many groups from that era, their overall popularity started to see a decline. There were internal shifts within the band itself. The music industry landscape was changing rapidly, and things just weren't the same as they had been during their peak years. By the mid-'80s, a significant number of the original members had moved on from the group to explore other musical avenues and opportunities. Ba were first formed in 1969, and let me tell you, they were a collective of exceptionally skilled musicians, including folks like Eric Burdon, Howard Scott, Lee Oskar, and Lonnie Jordan. And they weren't shy about blending genres. They fearlessly mixed funk, jazz, rock, soul, Latin rhythms, you name it. That unique fusion is precisely how they forged their distinct sound. They released Spill the Wine early on, which became a significant hit. And then, naturally, came Low Rider. That song transformed into a cultural anthem, an absolute classic. It was pure musical lightning in a bottle. And let's not forget, Why Can't We Be Friends? They were truly a musical powerhouse, weren't they? They consistently spread positive vibes and championed unity through their music. But along with great success often come difficulties. War experienced its fair share of internal disagreements, and there were quite a number of lineup adjustments over the years. Eric Burdon departed fairly early in their career, and by the late 70s, things became even more unsettled. There was internal drama, rising tensions, and more members leaving the group. Unfortunately, the difficulties didn't stop there. They endured some truly heartbreaking losses with the tragic murder of saxophonist Charles Miller in 1980 and the passing of percussionist Papa D. Allen in 1988. These events understandably took a heavy toll on the band. By the 1990s, the original core group had largely dissolved, with some former members going on to form the Lowrider Band. Lonnie Jordan, however, kept the War name alive, continuing to tour and perform with new musicians. The Spinners. Can you believe they formed way back in '54? That's some history. The classic lineup featured Henry Fambrough, Billy Henderson, Purvis Jackson, Bobby Smith, and G.C. Cameron. They were focused on smooth, appealing tunes right from the beginning, but the 1970s truly became their breakout decade. Timeless classics like I'll Be Around and Could It Be I'm Falling in Love seemed to be playing everywhere. They were the soundtrack to countless memories for so many people. The Spinners were absolute mainstays of R&B, crafting songs that could get your feet moving and touch your heart simultaneously. But change eventually arrived. G.C. Cameron was replaced by the talented Philip Wynne, who then ventured out for a solo career in '77. Following that, the lineup experienced numerous shifts over the years. By the '80s, members began to depart or sadly pass away. Billy Henderson left in '04, Purvis Jackson passed in '08, and Bobby Smith died in '13. But let's give a big hand to Henry Fambrough, who admirably kept the group's music going well into the 2020s. He truly kept their wonderful legacy alive for fans. The Emotions. Formed back in '68 by the talented Hutchinson sisters, Wanda, Sheila, and Jeanette. They actually began their musical journey singing gospel, but successfully transitioned into the worlds of R&B and disco during the '70s, and folks, that's when their careers really took off. They possessed a special kind of magic together, incredibly tight, beautiful harmonies, infectiously catchy songs, and an energy that radiated pure joy. Their collaboration with the legendary Maurice White of Earth, Wind and Fire proved to be a pivotal moment. Working together, they created absolute musical brilliance. Then in '77, they unleashed Best of My Love, and the entire world seemed to go crazy for it. The song soared to #1 on the charts, and even earned them a Grammy Award. The Emotions were a certified smash hit. But, as we know, the music industry is constantly changing. They encountered some issues with record labels, and musical tastes began to shift, making it increasingly difficult for them to maintain that top-tier status. By 1985, the original trio of sisters had largely stopped performing together on a regular basis. While they have come back together for special reunion performances over the years, the Emotions, as that iconic '70s hit machine, are no longer an active group. They left behind a wonderful legacy of soulful music, infectious disco grooves, and a powerful testament to the magic of sisterhood. MFSB. Formed back in '71, these folks were essentially the incredible house band for the legendary Philadelphia International Records. MFSB, which stood for Mother, Father, Sister, Brother, consisted of studio musicians who were the secret sauce behind countless hits for artists like the O'Jays, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, the Spinners, and so many others. They were the geniuses crafting those smooth, lush, funky, and soulful arrangements that made all those classic Philly soul songs so utterly unforgettable. Then lightning struck with T.Soapy, The Sound of Philadelphia. This phenomenal instrumental track was a complete game changer. It famously became the theme song for the TV show Soul Train and soared straight to the top of the charts in '74. It wasn't just a hit, it became a defining disco anthem, perfectly capturing the vibrant energy and spirit of that era. It showcased their collective brilliance to the entire world. But as the disco craze started to wind down in the late '70s, MFSB's widespread influence began to diminish as well. Internal challenges and shifts within the music industry ultimately led to their disbandment in the early '90s. The Dramatics. These guys got together back in 1964, featuring Ron Banks, Larry Demps, Elbert Wilkins, Willie Ford, and William Weegee Howard. From the very start, they possessed that smooth quality, but they also had this raw power, a genuine emotional depth that was just undeniably captivating. They were celebrated for those tight, soaring harmonies, and boy, did they have a talent for making you feel the weight of every single lyric. When they came out with hits like In the Rain and What Ya See Is What Ya Get, believe me, they really struck a chord with people. They weren't hesitant about getting real, about exploring deeper emotions, and listeners felt that authentic connection. Now, the Dramatics, they weren't just a passing fad. They enjoyed a significant period of success throughout the '70s. They consistently landed top 10 hits, collected gold record after gold record. They were genuinely making it big. They were absolutely lighting up the charts. But, as often happens with groups that stick around for a while, the lineup underwent changes over the years. Losing important members like Ron Banks and Willie Ford naturally had an impact, and the original configuration eventually dissolved. So, did we miss any of your favorite underappreciated bands from the '70s? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, be sure to check out other videos in our series exploring forgotten musical gems. And don't forget to subscribe and share Gold Days USA with your fellow music lovers. Thanks for watching, and keep the music alive.